Did you know teachers aren't humans? They're not allowed to show stress or age, have health problems, show fear, waste time, and most of all, fail. They're not even allowed to go to the bathroom. That's okay, because we're here to talk about how we're all just playing a role. And at 3 o'clock, we get to be us again. 40 years ago, two 8-year-old boys were bored out of their minds in school, and they vowed one day they would do something about it. They did it to honor their friends. They did it to honor their classmates. They did it for the love of learning. I'm Matt, and this is Rob, and 40 years later, we get our turn, but now we're playing teacher.
So today we're thinking
Man.
about
Yeah.
we were thinking about talking about I guess I mean this is not something that I think people would think about when they think about teaching, but like the prep and the lunch, you know. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I mean, going across the country, for example, I'm not sure, does every teacher get a prep period during the day? I don't actually know the answer to that. I know we have like our union in New York, in
You
our
know what?
schools.
That's a good question. I don't know everywhere. 'Cause the majority of my teaching's been in New York,
Yeah.
but there was always a prep and a lunch. Sometimes there's some kind of extra period besides that, um, you know, where you're doing something in the school. But for the most part, let's say you get a free period to, set up what you need to, and it's called the prep and do whatever you
Mm-hmm.
have to do to get everything ready. And then you have your lunch period, which is basically your time to eat,
Mm-hmm.
and that's considered your time, but it's not really your time, even though they say it's your time, because they'll take it away from you in a second, they'll come
Yeah.
over and say, yeah, because I've had meetings during your lunch. They'll ask you to come up, with your
Mm-hmm.
sandwich and you're there, so it's not, lunch is not really lunch. Lunch could be a big disaster.
Well, first, like, let's break down the period schedule, right? So, I mean, when I left, it's different now than from when I left, but
Yeah.
like, I'm just thinking of when the school day used to start. I think it started at, say, 8:10 or something, and then, the periods went from there, 50 to 55 minutes each time or whatever.
Most places now it's earlier,
Yeah.
it seems like it's going, there's so many different things where they have to fit in parent engagement and things. They usually vote on the hours, but a
Hmm.
lot of schools open, like even before 8 now,
Yeah.
some open like 7:20, 7:30, or 2 days are early and the rest, but they vote on it at the end of the year how they want to work this out.
Yeah.
But yeah, something like that. But the best thing you want, usually is like the right prep period. The worst thing to have, for a lot of people is like, some people just hate the last period prep. Some people love it, but most people don't want it because it's like usually the shortest period. And like,
Well,
yeah,
break
go ahead.
break down first though how many periods there are. Like, you know, what I mean, like, so for example, like,
Slate is 7 periods in a
okay,
day,
so a
right?
7 period day, each one is
Yeah, it's
50,
usually you teach
55
five. Yeah,
minutes,
like you.
right?
I always taught five, and then I get a lunch and a prep, right? So basically, you hope you get a solid prep in there where you get the full period. If you don't, you might the end of the day one's sort of a joke because you that means you taught straight and it's not cut up as much with the prep and the lunch. Because if you have like four in a row, you don't know what planet you're on after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like because they'll do that sometimes. You do the first four, and you get lunch, teach one more class. You know what I mean? Like, and then prep or something like that. There's a schedules like that. So the first thing I always did was, I just looked always when I would get my schedule. I'm just like, prep, where's my prep? Oh, okay. Ah, shit. Oh, that day sucks. Boom, 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 boom. You look in 5 seconds and you kind of see, what your year is going to be like within that first minute based on those two things. When is your lunch and your prep?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just for the free time. It's like to catch your breath. It really, when you divide the classes up, you're really seeing if there's a break in between sometimes, you know what I mean, to catch your breath, you know what I mean? And like, reshuffle materials, and things like that. And the kids also, you want them out, the room, and so if your classroom teacher, it's different, as far as you want them out of the room. but I guess for a cluster, it's almost the same thing because you have a new class coming and a new class coming, new class coming. The time in between the classes is a joke because there's always those teachers that drop off a class early or, you know what I mean, or
Well,
just waiting outside.
what's the difference between so let's just look at the first period and the last period of the day, right? The one
Yeah.
that starts the day and the one that ends the day. What's the difference between those if you're teaching? I'm not talking about prep or lunch. If you're teaching, what's the difference
Yeah.
between those periods and any other period, basically, you know?
Well, first period, kids are calmer, so if you're teaching that period, it's,
They're half
they're not
awake.
real
Like,
half awake. You got to do, then it's annoying, but you got kids that come in late and you
yep.
always have to, now they have breakfast in the room. So,
Oh,
some people make them
during
like,
first period?
like, no,
Oh,
it's like before first period, it's like, whatever you want to call it, the breakfast time or homeroom time, and they eat in the classrooms. So, well, it depends on the school, but where I worked, that's where they had it, right? We worked. So like, but then, this was I think after you left. But then if they come late, they still get breakfast. It depends on the attitude of the teachers. The teachers are sometimes like, just go to class. I was always like, if they showed up, I'm like, you can eat, I'll set them up, like at a spot, to sort of like, even if I have the materials out, I'll figure
yeah.
it out,
There's
you
also
know,
like morning announcements, attendance. Like there are things that take, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes that have to be done the first period that take away
yeah.
from the amount of like, so it doesn't sound like a
Hmm.
big difference, right? But planning for 40 minutes versus 50 minutes is a big deal. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it can make or
Well,
break a lesson, right? So,
well, where I was working, the end of the day, the hour, basically, it was really the period would almost start like 1:38, but they really
mm-hmm.
want to get there to 1:40.
Yep.
You sit them down, it's like 1:45.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting online at 2:05.
Yeah.
You know what I
It's like a
mean?
half
Like they go
period.
downstairs. Yeah, and
Right.
depending on the age of the kids, if it's little ones, they're down there even earlier. You know
Yep.
what I mean? So what are you going to do in 15 minutes? You know what I mean? Like, for me, like that would be a song routine. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, or whatever, or just they're not learning any new topics or anything like that. You're not doing your full 50-minute thing. So it's kind of a waste if you just have a class on that little block as a
Mm-hmm.
cluster teacher, as your class. If it's your prep, if you just taught all day and then seventh period, you're not really planning. You're just waiting. That's
Mm-hmm.
all. That's all. You're waiting
Wait,
because
so
you might.
do you like the last period prep or not? Because I loved it.
I was mixed on it.
Yeah.
Like when I was glad when it would happen,
Yeah.
right? Because I was like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
At
and
1:30,
then
you're done.
right,
Yeah.
right. And then but then you're also like like the day, depending on your day, like you could have used that, those long period, because there is a good feeling when you realize like, oh, it's like 10 o'clock. If you have a prep and a lunch, I don't have nothing going on until like 12. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like it's nice. And you can actually get things done that you'd want to do if you have a situation like that. But I would always like pop out sometimes if another teacher had last period prep, and we just sort of like stare at each other. I remember doing that with you sometimes. We were just so fried. I think we'd had last period prep together sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in that backside office, and I remember just sort of like I was at my desk, your desk was towards the little corner door, and
Yeah.
it was like a long, narrow apartment. You know what I mean? Like it just stretched on forever, that back
Yeah.
office
I
we
mean,
had. And
let's break it down. Like picture for anyone listening, it's like
it's
I
like
would say
this
what
ruler.
six it's like
Yeah,
six
it's
feet
like
wide
this.
and it's like 30 feet long, you know? And so yeah,
So
you're like at one end. You have your feet
if you're
kicked up on your little
right,
wooden thing, and my feet are kicked up on my desk, and we're just kind of
right.
like staring at each other, like what the hell is happening?
If you're watching this and not just listening right now, I'm holding up a ruler here. And so like here's Rob, with his feet up, and I'm all the way down here, and then my feet are up, and you could actually keep going all the way down, and then
To
there's
the
a
window.
refrigerator.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a window and there's a refrigerator. We have it pretty decked out. Yeah,
And
so
a
your
sink.
feet would be up, and my feet would be up, and we would just stare at each other. And then sometimes that's what I do. Like we were good friends. We didn't have to say a word.
Yeah.
Like we just look at each other and be like, "Oh my God. Oh my God." Like, and like what's in our mind is like, "I'm done."
Yeah.
I'm done, like it could have been a million things. um,
during
behavior.
during those times too, like a common, maybe there would be one word that would be spoken. A common word that would be spoken would be Superpong.
Yeah. Right. And then they'd be like, and then I'd think about it for a second, like, yeah, let's go. And then so we'd go into the other room, and then we'd have to sometimes turn the desks.
Yeah. Do you want to
And
describe
sometimes,
do you want to
all
describe
right,
Superpong?
all right. So the desks were these
Tables.
long, yeah, tables were these long rectangular tables, that you could probably fit around 7 or 8 kids, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So they're very long. You had six of them, and I
Yep.
had six of them too when I was in the lab,
Yeah.
right? So we had the tables in two C formations
Mm-hmm.
facing each other,
Yep.
right? And across the room. And then there's just a big space in the middle of the room. So it's kind of like setting up six ping pong tables,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And
Narrower, but
then,
yeah. Hmm.
right, same rules as ping pong, but it's kind of like combining ping pong and racquetball together.
Yeah.
And we played
And
this like
pickleball, like there's no net. There's no
pickleball,
net
right.
though. There's no
There's no
net.
net, right, right. And we're playing it. No, we both were pretty skilled. I would say, definitely moderate to more,
Yeah.
higher level ping pong players, right? Like we're not basic ones. We're pretty, you played and I played.
Yeah.
So like, so everything cool?
Yeah, I'm looking for my I'm looking for that thing you got me, the first Super Pong champ
Oh,
desk.
you got as a gift?
Yeah, I'll find it for the next time.
Were you sick? Or did I get
Yeah,
it as a
yeah,
gift?
I was out for the surgery, and when I came back, because we had the trophies that we ordered. We had trophies, but
Yeah.
let's keep going with the desk setup. Yeah.
All right.
So,
All right. So we're playing, so basically it's two C formation, uh six tables, and then we would play like complete maniacs.
hmm.
Like this was like racquetball, intense sweating across the room,
Yeah.
like diving for shots, and everything. And we would play it sometimes over the lunch or the prep, you
Yep.
know. And I remember one
Before
time,
school, after school. Yep.
no, even in the middle of the
Yeah,
day.
yeah. No,
I
I know. I'm
remember
saying both.
now
All.
I remember I was, especially when we were working together, I was you would give me the laps sometimes, but you were there first, so I would be pushing. I was kind of hired as the pushing guy. But you did some push in. I think you were throwing me a bone later on, and I would, we kind of go back and forth. But you more or less had the lab, and I was going up, pushing in. So I remember one time, like I would finish a super pong game with you a minute before class, but I was like, and I would jet up the stairs, right? And the kids are waiting, like, probably like a fourth grade, fifth grade, and they're sitting on the rug, and I just jetted in, I think my stuff was up there already, or I grabbed something, was doing, I just kind of like, and I just went in the chair like that, and I just
Yeah,
sat
yeah.
there. And I'm just breathing heavy. The kids are looking at me, I'm like sweating, like, and then it'd be like, were you playing Super Pong? And I was like,
Well, the best is when like they would, like we'd be
they'd
playing up
watch
until
sometimes.
yeah, yeah, they would like a class that was about to come in. The
Right.
teacher,
They'd see it.
teachers would try to come early and drop them off early. We would lock the
We still
door,
play. Yeah.
and we play right up until it was like until the second, and then unlock the door. The kids
But
who
the
are
win
lucky enough to be in the front of the line are
that's
peeking
what I'm
through the
saying. The,
window.
the window, they got the window shot and they were just like staring and trying to and then they're hovering over each other
Yeah, I
and
mean,
they're like and then you like dive for a shot and knock
yeah.
over the bookcases. And I'm like, we're pushing the time as much as we can, much as we can. We're like, no, we got one more point. Like, all right, let's go to the door. Wonder
I
I was
mean,
hated.
it's just so that people can understand this too. Like when Matt says that there's six tables that are set up in two C formations, like each one of us has to cover a pretty large area, much, much larger than ping pong, right? So it's like you have to cover. Let me just think about. I want to think about this for one moment, like how
Yeah,
big those tables actually were. So it was 6, 9. Okay, so it was
that would
about
be
50.
yours apartment.
Yeah, there was about 15 feet across of coverage, but then we had them in a C formation, so you had to cover the
Hmm.
sides too, right? So you're talking about 25 feet of coverage each, where you have to run around, right?
Yeah.
And and basically there's no net, so I'm hitting it across a void, trying to get it onto
Mhm.
one of your three tables, and you're doing the same for my three tables.
Yep.
But like you said, when you said about the diving, though, my favorite memory ever was me hitting an amazing shot, thinking like already celebrating, and then seeing you flying across the air and smashing into the FOSS kits that were piled up and everything just like
I
and
think
getting the shot. And I didn't even, I was so like awestruck. I didn't even go for it. I wasn't even worthy of trying to return that, you know?
we weren't even worried if I was okay. And these
I
FOSS
know.
kits were like giant
Yeah.
things, and they were set up. You had, well, the one thing you did, and I learned this from you, and I incorporated this in my later years, when I just was such a loner, the man cave. You
Yeah.
built your desk before you had the back room, but your desk for a while was in back of all the FOSS kits.
Well,
So
they,
you built them up, and then you put your desk in there. So you basically created like this fort around you. You know
it
what I
was like
mean?
a
And then
giant igloo, floor to
yeah,
ceiling with a
yeah. And
door.
I smashed into it. You didn't even
Yeah.
care that I
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
destroyed the fort. Like you
Yeah.
like it was just the most amazing shot.
That was part of the kids being convinced that in the igloo we were working on building the secret tunnel that we claimed that we had that went around the building.
Oh, they thought it was in there?
Well,
No, I
they thought
remember
in that corner there was
okay.
the desk, and then there was like a
Oh,
standing tall closet where I kept my stuff actually. But they believed
well,
that, and it never had stuff in it, so it never opened. They believed that in that closet there was a tunnel, and other
okay,
ones
they
too, not
told,
just that one, but that was one of them.
but then
Yeah.
we also convinced them that it was in the back. Remember we
Hmm.
discovered a small hole in the back room,
Yep.
and then and I had a class in there, and I said we got to somehow get a kid over here just to because that's gonna sell this whole
Yes.
story, like
Hmm.
that we have a secret tunnel going around the whole school, and that's why we're able to get to places fast and fast. It helped that we had multiple doors because sometimes we would just come in really fast to come out,
Yeah.
and then so they would get confused, like how did you get here so fast? And then so I had this sweet little girl, maybe like third grade, walk over to they were like, can we go in that back room? I'm like, no, no one can go in the back room. That's where the secret of the tunnel is also, and so I said, I'll let one of you go. So I'm like, and they're all like, me, me, me. I'm like, all right, I'll pick you. And then she walks over, like goes to the back room. And what I do, I don't let her in. I just sort of open the door
Hmm.
and I just sort of like point to where, like she'd be able to see. They see her completely, right? And
Yeah.
they're looking at her and they're watching me and they're looking at her expression. And she looks up, stares at it for about 5 seconds, right? And then I close the door. I'm like, all right, you can go sit down now. She sits down, everyone's watching her, and the silence is deafening. She takes her seat, she sits down, and all the eyes are on her. I sit back in the rocking chair, and everybody looks at her, and you cannot get the timing any more perfect. All she says is this two words. She goes, "It's true." That was it. It's like
That's
we were
all.
done. They
Yeah.
didn't have it. They're like I started. This just blew their mind because in
Yeah.
the back of their head, they're almost like they can't really have a ton, even though they're kids, right?
It's true
There
that
can't
there's
be
a
a tunnel
tunnel.
go, but like yeah, but they just
Yeah.
whatever she
Yeah. Yeah.
saw, like and she had no reason to
No.
lie. You know what
No.
I mean? Like
Right.
this was a girl that did not lie. She
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
trust. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You didn't pick like the class clown or anything like that. Be like, yeah, 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 I think I saw something. No, she just said whatever she just told them, seal the deal. So then the stories can go on forever.
Hmm.
We could talk about the tunnel for 20 minutes.
Yep. Oh man. It just, well, it reminds me too. So we had, I mean, we had the room set up. We created the game based on the way the room was set up. Right. So like, that was a good setup for the room too, just in terms of how the kids worked and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what
Sometimes
else though.
sometimes we didn't, but I think eventually we just it kind of we just made it easier to
Yeah.
have because we're so into Superpong. We'll just
Oh
leave the
yeah.
tables like
Yeah.
this so we can play.
Hmm.
And it was a great, it was a great stress reliever too. And
Oh
that's one
yeah.
of the things you want, on your prep or anything. It's just, like sometimes we just want to just play a little bit because it wasn't just a regular ping pong game, it was a workout.
Well, people
And
watch the
then
intro like that we have on the clips that we do for the video, like the YouTube
yeah.
thing. There's a
What's
couple
on
of
there?
tiny,
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
The
yeah,
longer
yeah,
intro, there's a couple of
yeah, yeah.
really quick, like
Right,
ping
right, right.
pong things, and that's you can actually see the setup if you know,
I
whatever.
I I think when I met you, we talked about ping pong when I was even trying out for the job. I don't know, like
What?
it might have been one.
Yeah. Oh,
I
yes.
was downstairs, and we talked about. They just left me there downstairs for a long time. Like they left me
Yeah.
like for hours when I tried out. And you kind of strolled in, like they had me go, like they left me there 2 hours, and they're like, you can go get something to eat and then come back. And then I did. I just like went to a diner and came back. Then I'm still there like another hour. Then you came in and you just kind of like lounging around the office and very relaxed. And I'm sort of looking up, like, what's this guy? Like, you were joking with the secretaries. And then me and you started a conversation, like, and we talked for like a good 10 minutes before they came and got me to go do a demo lesson. Right.
Ah, okay. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so I was trying to think of like our first conversation, but I know it had to do with like you were like, telling me probably like you're 3 to 5 science, and I'm like going for K to two. And I think we probably talked about ping pong. I know we probably talked about wrestling.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
You know what I mean? Like, and I somehow remember you telling me there was a fridge in the lab, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I didn't want to even go each. I just wanted to go. I want to go up to the lab and play ping pong.
Well, I mean, like, think about the. I mean, we're going to talk about this in a different thing, but like, kind of like some of the secrets of the school, right? Like people, not everyone realized that we had that whole side room with a refrigerator and a sink and a window and you know what I mean, like, and all the stuff that we had in there. I mean, we watched movies in there. We put a screen in there and a
Yeah,
projector.
no, it was that's when I went into teaching, I was an actor, right? And I got to the point when I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I didn't really want to do this, but I went into the profession, just to have a steady paycheck. And I thought then after a while, I kind of I met some male teachers and I looked at my life and I was like, oh, you know what? I could see myself doing this. And I wanted that, I wanted that security. I was older. I was already 30 and things are winding down. So I was like, I was looking at this, but I was like, sort of like, this is, once I got this job, I knew this is it for a long, long time, it's time to grow up now. So, I was like going in, and it was hidden. And then I met you and we're like, so we're gonna go play ping pong. We're gonna watch, there's movies up there. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool.
We had a rocking
Yeah,
chairs,
yeah,
you know.
those first few years, I was like, all right, we
But
just, yeah, we had a lot of fun.
trying to think of, I mean, we had a lot of, I'm thinking of the room too. We had a lot of other stuff in there, like the seating, like where we would do our little mini lessons. It was almost like an amphitheater. There was like different levels of seating.
That
Kids
was
would sit up here, you know.
that was you, like I took that from you, like what I mean. I rolled with that in my classes, like the way they sat and stuff like that. But you can, but that's one of the best things about setting up the classroom, which is a
Mm.
whole other, like should be a whole other podcast. But like setting them up, yeah, you have like I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but like strawberry seats or flower seats, and
Yeah.
some
For
set on like
IKEA.
the
Yeah.
top,
Yeah.
yeah, the radiator bookcase,
Yeah.
but you did it in a certain way where they just came in, it was a routine. So it was like
Yeah.
first five up top, you know what I mean? And I would watch because when I tried out, they let me watch you for the
Yeah.
first few days.
Yep.
So I sat, those were the things I was taking in. I was just like, first five up top. All right. So it's like a routine. And I was like, next five, but it was funny, like pizza chairs, or whatever you had, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
all these
Right. Right.
different
Right.
size, you sit in the tree, like as a, know,
Yeah.
and I was like, and then it was like at the end of it, you were just like everybody else on the floor, and then
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and they sat, and
But
then you
that,
just took your
yeah.
time in the rocking chair, and you would just take out a big book and you'd start like turning the pages slowly. I'm like, where did we leave off? And you started reading. I don't even
Like
know what it was. It was like Curious George or something, or
it's like Dumbledore.
yeah. And he started reading to them, and nothing to do with science. It was just you. I remember we talked about it, and
Yes, yeah.
I remember you telling me you thought it was just a great thing to read to them, and that stayed with me also. And I would start to do. I stole a lot of your act. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
like just
Yeah, yeah.
different, but it's not an act. It's different things that you had to find out worked. right? You had to go through your own experience to work, Then I would say, all right, let me try this, try that. As I was molding into who I was going to be as an educator, I took pieces.
Yeah, yeah,
I definitely took the first thing I saw you do actually with kids is you went to the door and you went to the hallway and you would sort of casually talk to the teachers, right? And then the kids would might be doing this, and you just as soon as your attention was to them, you'd say straighten up. But it
yeah,
wasn't done like in a mean way. It was done like as like a joke in between you and the kids,
yeah,
almost, right? Like they didn't want to be the ones to be out of line. You know what I mean? Like it was like they, like it was like, yes, sir, we're in the army. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I
Well, it's
I
like
did
game. It's like
that.
game on. It was like the start of the
Yeah.
game. You know.
But it was like an understanding between. So I do that. I did that to now.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
didn't sound right. I took that until now. My Brooklyn accent just came out.
Well, it was like like and that first thing that you're doing when they're in there and you've got them seated and they're waiting for you, because like that was the key, right? Like they knew when they came into one of us, they were going to have fun. So
Well,
they know what the waiting, they know that there's like a very brief waiting period, but that first thing that either of us would do is just priming the mind, it's priming the mind. It's like getting them into the
yes.
zone that we want them in. And you're like the thing that you did that I loved, which I stole from you too, was like the focus check, right? So after they're sitting down, it's like you're like Mr. Spock, you.
No, I did first. I did. It was 3 point, like a 3 point thing. Turn on your brains, click.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? No, no, actually, first I would ask them a question.
yeah,
And then I remember this question I used for years, but then I transferred it over to any subject I was in. Like because if I was teaching theater, I would use it. If I was doing science, I would use it. If I made up my own class, whatever it was, I would just use this question for a long time. It was just, let me see who's ready for science, right? So I
yeah,
would purposely
yeah,
just like let them, I would teach that my first few weeks. I'm like, so this is what's going to happen. And I would go over, I'm going to come in and then I'm going to put my stuff down and you're going to do this. And then I'm going to, and then eventually when I'm ready, um, for you, you know that I'm ready now because I'm going to say one question for you. It's going to be the same. It's going to be, let me see who's ready for science. And then you're going to do is this.
yeah,
So like I would go, I remember going to the annex, the small, it was like around the corner. I would go over there and then the kids could be under the table, it could be anywhere and
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
And I remember like there was this teacher there, and she's still there, and reading teacher, she would ask me like, she was asking me questions one day and the kids were insane. I was walking in and the other teacher was sort of like, okay, you're here. I'm going to do this, and the kids were just rumbling. And she's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, no, it's no big deal because I was confident that I knew once I said that question, they were
yes,
going to sit perfectly. So I remember then I just put my stuff down. She still had to ask me something or give me a paper. And then I'm so sorry. This is like, take it. I was like, no, no. And then I just sort of said, give me a second. I turned to them, let me see who's ready for science. And they were like perfect.
yeah.
And then she's looking at me like, and then she came over to me like a minute or two later. She's like, how did you do that? It's like
I
that.
remember,
It's like
yeah.
it's like this.
Um,
It's a routine.
But like the focus check, I remember the first time I saw it with the fingers. I don't know, like you
Right.
would do something like that, like a
No, that
radar,
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right after. So
Okay.
it's all of these things are like 5 seconds. It's like,
Yeah.
let me see
Yeah.
who's ready for science. Boom. And then turn on your brains. Boom. Focus check. And then I'm like this. And then I started to get lit and I spin my finger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
this, and I'd go up to
But
them, and then they don't know, they have no idea what I'm doing.
but the funniest
That's
thing, like I remember watching you do that and then looking at the
yeah,
kids and like the kids, I mean, like they are like some of them are
right.
like they're like
Well,
how can I look
I would
focused? You
tell
know what I
them
mean? Like what is
that
it?
like some of them start to like analyze what I'm actually doing, and I would tell them, well, I can see inside your brain. I see
Yeah.
that you actually turned the knob on that we just went, oh, okay.
Hmm.
Oh man, I make
Of
sure I
course.
do this. I didn't do the switch. I was like, wait, did I just turn it off now?
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine. Wait, let me see. No, you're
Righty
good. You're good.
tighty, lefty loosey. Okay.
Yeah. It's the beginning of
Uh,
their obsessive compulsive disorder. Wait,
yeah.
let
Yeah.
me spell out, which I know about.
Yeah. You're transferring.
Yeah, so that was
Man.
that was my opener. I got that.
Yeah, then I mean, then there's like little things too, like you said before, if you're lucky, you have 5 minutes in between two periods, right? Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes like one period ends and the other one begins. There's like
I
not
don't even
even
remember when as far back as I can remember now, my later years, it became 2 minutes.
okay, okay. Oh, so
So
even
that I
worse,
no,
right?
so I don't even, and then the teacher carries, they come early. So it was really just everybody just trampling over each other
Yes.
in those 2 minutes, right? If you have to get somewhere else, like during the COVID years, like and after, they stop, like if they, I would then have a classroom for a while before them, but the COVID years, I remember I would just like push in so everybody would have masks and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and then like like I just feel like the schedule is like out of whack, and like there's always something going on. People taking the elevators, there's sick kids here or there. I just felt like it was hard to get around. And
Yeah.
then just getting there in 2 minutes, it was difficult.
I mean, and you know this, like I'm sure there was a reason for this, like having teachers do common preps or whatever, but like the day would be
I never,
like no, I'm saying the classroom teachers, like the
yeah,
on grade level teachers having the same prep. So that, but what that would mean for us was that, like, in let's say on a Monday, if I'm in the room, or if you're a push in, either way, you have like first and then fourth and then second and then third and then fifth. Like, you know what I mean? Like this, and transitioning the classroom from a first grade lesson to a fourth grade lesson in under five
yeah.
minutes with the transitions of the kids in and out. You know what I mean? It's
Well,
just like
even the way you speak to them, if you go K to five, one K to
yeah,
five,
yeah,
like I remember I got so it becomes such a routine after a while, and you forget what you're doing, the day to day thing. And if you're not focusing, I remember like there was one time I ended up like because the way you speak to kindergarten, it's like, all right, everybody, have a like goodbye, my friends, and then like all of a sudden, like the big kids are like standing right here, and you're like, all right. Oh, wait, I got to change that. Hi, everybody. How are you? You know what I mean? It
yeah,
completely
yeah, yeah.
changes. Like I remember one time I kept the same voice for a second. I was like, wait, all right, shift over now. Now you're like, they're gonna think you're crazy. Come on, everybody. They're like up to here. Everybody come in.
Trying to think of that. There's a trio of movies. One's with Bruce Willis, and it's like, what is it? There's one though where the guy has multiple personalities, like 17 different personalities, But like he comes into the
Oh
room
yeah.
once and
I
he's
saw
like,
that. That was like the series
yeah,
with Glad the M
Unbreakable
Night series.
Glass, yeah,
Yeah, and I forgot the one. Mr.
Split,
Glass was the one.
Split,
Split. Yeah,
yes.
right. And he had multiple personalities,
I
and
mean, that's what it feels
boom,
like though,
boom, boom. It does. It does. And then there's the way you have to speak to teachers in
to
between that
the
too.
teachers, to the
Different
parents, to the
personalities.
admin, yeah.
Oh my God. And even shifting your personality between different teachers,
Oh my
just to
God,
get
yeah,
through the
yep,
day, like I remember there's this para there, this guy that I became friends with at the end, an older guy, he's older than me. He's like, he had a whole career already, as an electrician. He's just kind of there for a few years, and he just would always like ask me like, what do you, and one time I was in the auditorium at the end of the day, and I was like, had a class, and then I had to stay an extra few minutes to do something there, and then I was going to be late there. And, I was like, it was one of those situations where I think I was rehearsing a show, and I was like I'm going to be, and I'm trying like to figure out how not to piss off this teacher because I know her personality and I know what's gonna. So I was like going on the phone. I was making a deal almost like, I can give you 10 minutes at this time and this and this. And I'm thinking about all these things, why I'm teaching. And I'm like, running up and down. Yes. And he's looking at me like, what are you doing? And I just turned to him. It's like, I'm putting out fires.
mm-hmm.
That's what I'm doing. And that's what it is,
Yeah,
because you're hustling and figuring out how people are going to react to decisions you have to make on the fly to get everything done,
yeah, yep,
and I always felt like, you know, so by the time you have your prep and your lunch, getting back to that, like it wasn't just the kids, it was the teachers, it was the day, physical exhaustion. Like, oh my God, that's why
yeah,
I just want a space to put my feet up,
yep,
and like I purposely always found, I took that man cave idea you did, and I would always put that when I was setting up a classroom, that was one of the first things I did. It was like, where am I giving myself
yes,
this
right,
corner to
right,
sort of like, like just be. where,
Mm-hmm.
I can see them, but like if they're walking by in the hallway, they're not going to be stopping and
Yeah,
tapping
yeah,
and
yeah.
like, yeah, Mr. Jacobs, what I mean, like you want your space almost, like just to breathe, So I would purposely work that out, like always looking at the architectural design of the room. Where's the best spot for me, and the moving of the furniture in the right direction so you have sort of an area where you can just sort of be. I always like the desk, and then even after I teach, I could sort of like just sit down, because
Mm-hmm.
I'll give them everything I got, 15, 20 minutes, then I got to sit down.
Yeah.
But they're set up. I'm gonna watch you. A lot of people didn't, like administrators didn't like that, where you just sort of sit and watch. I always thought, like, why not? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
many times are you going to circulate around and ask them the same questions over and over? Let them think for a few minutes. So I would always just sit. I'd give them everything I got. This is what we're doing, and I'm going to watch now, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And see, and I would purposely be in a spot where I could see them. So if I see them, then, and then when they come up, it's like they can't really come up to my desk. Someone like stepping up to a little platform. So then it's like, they're in line to ask me something, and I'm just like, yes, how can I help you? And then they would ask that question to me, especially when they're little. It's cute, it's funny, but they're also learning personal space and everything. And then they can't really get to my desk. I always work that out, like almost like a little thing, like, yes, can I help you? I just saw you 30 seconds ago. What
The
can I
help
do?
desk. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and I would talk to them, but they didn't want to be by me. At that point, whatever they were doing was there, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
they didn't need to be by me. And I felt like if I'm there, sometimes they're just gonna want to still be, especially if you're, like you said, if you make it that much fun, they want to still be with you. Now it's time to be with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is the man cave.
Well, that's our 45 minutes today. That went by fast.